What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Lexus RX 350 F-Sport all-wheel drive. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with this very cool RX 350 to review for you guys today. So about the RX 350, well, these were completely redesigned a couple of years ago and still looks really sharp. I know, not everyone loves this grille on these new Lexuses, but I'm starting to like it more and more as time goes by personally, and I think now it actually has a really sharp look. It's just a very imposing, grille there, obviously because of its size, but also the hood still comes up very high, and so it makes for a very large front end that just looks a little, more imposing, I think, than some of the more mundane looking crossovers out there. And overall, I think it's actually a really good look with these LED headlamps and everything else. Coming down to the sides here, it's more complexity. Towards the bottom, you'll see a little line that sweeps up towards the top, and then you see up top there, it's a very interesting C-pillar arrangement where you actually have a little mini window there built into it, and then the rest of it is just kind of a blacked out piece that also just looks really cool. Going out back there, you can see the very cool LED elements you have there in those taillights. You also just have a nice little roof spoiler there, and a little bit of a rear diffuser built into the rear bumper, which also has real actual exhaust tips into the rear bumper there, which is cool to see. And yeah, overall, I think it's a really good looking vehicle that here, even a couple years later, has aged very well, and I think actually looks really sharp still. Whereas for the interior of the 2018 Lexus RX 350, well, the first thing you notice is just how solidly Lexus interiors are built. I mean, the doors are nice and heavy, have a nice solid thunk to them, just a really heavy feel. Everything feels really well put together here in this vehicle, and that just kind of stands out to me above the rest that I usually encounter here. But anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, really nice leather seats here that are really aggressively bolstered for an SUV. This is the F-Sport one, that's why it has these more aggressively bolstered seats. You can get some softer and less aggressive bolstering in the regular RX 350, but here in the F-Sport you get these sportier seats, which feel pretty good. They're a little bit on the firmer side, I will say that. I'll have to see, in my week of driving, if they're too firm or if they're just right, for a sportier SUV here. But, I will say that, the seat bottom is pretty soft. It's actually the seat back that's just a little firmer, but again, just helps with the sporty feel of this. But if you want the most luxurious feeling seats, I would probably go for the non-F-Sport version. But these seats are really great with really nice bolstering that hugs you in well, and overall, they're pretty good seats. Next is the steering wheel here in the RX 350, which is a really nice wheel, a little bit on the thicker side, which I really like. I like the perforated leather here at the 9.3 portions. Has a great 9.3 grip, by the way. Nice little 10.2 notches, and then just a few buttons here on it. It's actually a nicely uncluttered wheel. I like how they still have the cruise control on a little stalk. That way you don't have 15 extra buttons on the steering wheel for all your cruise control functions. Just a few buttons here, and then you also have your paddle shifters, which are plastic. It would be nice if they were metal, but a lot of the other competitors these days are using plastic as well, and they're nicely placed paddles as well, and so overall a really great steering wheel. Next are the gauges here in the RX 350, which are very cool. Again, very reminiscent of stuff you've seen in sportier Lexuses in the past, and really the only part that isn't digital is the fuel and coolant gauges there. Otherwise, you have a nice large tachometer front and center here. I believe these are also specific to the F-Sport. I think regular RX 350s don't have quite as sporty of a setup, but I really love the way this looks, with that digital tach in the middle there with a speedometer right in the middle of that, and it also changes looks depending on what mode you're in. So if you go over to sport mode, it has the white face on it, which looks really cool, and then you go to eco mode and it goes kind of back to the regular normal mode there, but a really nice little display there. It's really cool. And then you have another little digital display on the left there, which gives you all your trip information, fuel economy. Also will do navigation, audio stuff, as well as all your settings for the safety systems and things like that. And so, obviously a little bit of a smaller screen there with that. Not a ton of info or anything. It's not super futuristic like stuff you see in some of the competitors, but overall a really great set of gauges here that are pretty clean and simple as well. There's not a million things to look at, which I really appreciate. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, right up top, you have this massive 12.3-inch widescreen infotainment display that's really far set back there, which I think actually helps to kind of keep your eyes closer to the road whenever you're looking at, instead of looking down or looking closely at something that's, a lot closer to you. This is kind of a little bit further off, so, it's not as much of an adjustment for your eyes. And anyway, it's a really good system. It's high resolution. The menus and everything are really well sorted out and fairly really easy to use. The only complaint that some people still have is this little controller that, you know, is like a mouse, and it does have a little bit of force feedback, so you do, when you land on an icon, it kind of gives you a little bit of resistance there, so that, you know, it's not like you're, you know, trying to delicately get it in exactly the right position or anything, but it's still, you know, it's a little distracting when you're driving. When you're parked, it's fine, and it's something that you do get used to over time. You know, I've had other Lexus press vehicles in the past, and it's not something that has really bothered me after a week of driving. You know, I kind of got used to it, but just not something, it probably isn't for everyone. We do have a couple shortcut buttons here, and it's nice to have the split screen layout as well on the screen there, so you can have navigation, which, you know, looks pretty good. Unfortunately, there is still no Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. We do know that for the 2019 Lexus ES, that's getting CarPlay, so hopefully at least CarPlay comes to all Lexus models here for maybe 2019 or 2020. But anyway, you know, like I said, overall still, you know, good infotainment system that gets all the basics done well. You know, you have a volume knob and a tune knob, which is always great to see, so very easy to navigate radio stations and things like that, and so overall really well done. Coming down to the rest of the controls here, right up top you see a nice analog Lexus clock, and then you have your few radio buttons here, you know, not a whole lot, and then you have your climate controls here, which are, you know, nice and simple there, and you know, overall, you know, not too many buttons. The only other buttons you do have are down here by the shifter for your heated and cooled seat controls, as well as your parking brake, and the only complaint I have with that is whenever the car is in park, the shifter partially blocks those buttons, so it's a little bit of a reach around the shifter to get to those, but whenever you're in drive, it's totally fine, so not a huge deal there. Just, you know, I kind of wish maybe these buttons were placed a little bit over to the left here where the parking brake portion is instead. As far as storage space here in the RX 350, it's actually pretty good for an SUV. First off, in the doors here, you have a large map pocket with a bottle holder, and it kind of opens up to allow you to easily access that stuff, which is good to see. Also by your left knee there, you'll see another little drop down pocket, which can fit, you know, maybe a small smartphone. Otherwise, you know, mostly just like parking tickets, change, things like that. A little too small for most sunglasses, at least with cases. Anyway, nice to have that. Coming over to the center here, you have another large cubby that's about the size of, you know, a large smartphone, things like that. It will fit in there easily. You also have a power outlet there as well. And then you have your two cup holders here, which aren't too deep, but, you know, should be a good size. They're nicely out of the way. And then you have the center armrest, which is really nice and softly padded, really plush. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have this very deep cubby that actually, it's got a lot of depth to it here, so you can fit tons of stuff in there. You also find two USB jacks, an auxiliary jack, and a power outlet in here, so nice to have all of that, and overall a really great large usable space there. A couple other storage spaces to note are a sunglasses holder up here in the roof, and also a little pocket here on the passenger side of the center console, you know, for your passenger to, you know, fit small knickknacks in there, which is really handy. Backseat space in the Lexus RX is pretty nice. So, you know, very soft, comfortable seats. And I'm 5'9". Me sitting behind myself, I have about 4 inches of leg room to spare there. Plenty of headroom as well. And those seats do slide forwards and backwards, and the seat backs recline. So you can have it really nice and relaxed there if you want, or it's also very easy to flip it forward again if you want to fold down those rear seats to get into the cargo area there. And you also find a center armrest there, which folds down, and you have two cup holders in there, and then you also find another little cubby in there. One thing that's missing though is there aren't any other USB jacks in the back of this vehicle, so you just have the two in the armrest up front here, and that's it. So that's the only thing I would say is an exclusion. When you're looking forward from the back seat there, you will find some air vents and a single old-fashioned power outlet in there, and a little cubby. So good to have at least one power outlet, but it would be nice to have some USB jacks, since a lot of the competitors are offering some form of a USB jack there in the second row. But overall, you know, a really great back seat. Trunk space in the Lexus RX 350 is really quite spacious. There's a large amount of space that, you know, they didn't try and squeeze a third row into this. Instead, you just have a nice large cargo area. Of course, there is now the RX 350L coming, which gives you that third row and a little bit of a longer back end there if you want that. But here in the regular RX 350, just a nice large cargo area that also you can open up the floor there, and you'll see another little cubby as well as a spare tire, which is good to see. And so, of course, like I said, the rear seats do fold flat, so you can have even more space there if you want. But overall, really, you know, spacious cargo area there, even for this class. And so overall, really well done there. One other little thing I want to add about the luxuriousness of this interior is at night. At night, the ambient lighting in here is really cool, where it lights up these creases in the doors, and it just has a very kind of a little bit more of a futuristic glow to it than some of the other ambient lighting systems in other competing vehicles. And so that really just helps it to feel just a little bit more upscale at night, which I really appreciate. All right, so starting to go for a drive. The Lexus here is this very nice leather pouch for the key, and of course it's just, you know, got a really nice key though, still with some metal trim here on it, and really great. But anyway, it's keyless entry and push button start, so you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Lexus RX 350 F-Sport. So the first thing you notice is the outstanding visibility you have here on the RX 350. I mean, most mid-size crossovers are pretty good, but this is really outstanding. I mean, a nice thin A-pillar, and I love how the windshield is angled so that it gives you a really nice large view. And again, you can see everything very well. You can see out through the A-pillar there with that little extra window by the mirror there. Excellent, excellent visibility forward here. View out of the sides is also pretty good with, you know, windowsills that don't come up too high. And view out of the back is also really good as well. Other things to note here, whenever you're in the normal or eco mode here, everything is a little bit more gradual, but it is still, you can tell, very responsive to your inputs. You know, so throttle response has a little bit before, you know, you have a little bit of tip in before you actually get into the actual responsiveness of the pedal. Same goes for the brakes, which have a little bit of a dead travel before you really start getting into their braking abilities. But everything, you know, is nicely relaxed, I would say, you know, from the get-go in just the standard default mode here. But we'll go ahead and put it into the Sport Plus mode, and let's turn down onto this back road here, see how it does. And here we go. Okay, took a second to respond, but it's getting up and going pretty well. And then as I slow it down, I feel that mushy brake pedal, which I'm not a huge fan of, but we'll see, you know, how it goes here a little bit later on. But anyway, the RX 350 here has a 3.5 liter V6 engine that does 295 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque. It gets this thing up and going 0 to 60 in about 6.9 seconds. So no slouch at all, you know, and it actually compared to some of the other competitors out there, you know, which always have, you know, somewhere between like 250 to 260 horsepower. This is a little bit above, you know, it gives you a little bit more power. And I like that it's still a naturally aspirated engine too. You know, you don't have to wait for any kind of turbo to spool up or any kind of disconnect with that. It's just very sharp and responsive here. Although it's still, even in Sport Plus mode, it does not like hanging on to gears. It constantly has to, you know, put it back into the lower gears whenever it sees a throttle input there. But I wish it would kind of hang on to those gears a little bit more. But again, we're talking about a crossover after all. This isn't supposed to be set up to be as sporty as an actual full-on F model or something like that, because the gearing and stuff like the GSF that I reviewed a couple years ago is phenomenal. And so obviously this is a little softer, again, just being the F Sport version as well. Other things here, we'll take it out of the Sport Plus mode and just go back to normal mode here. And then it gets nice and quiet and sedate. It has an 8-speed automatic transmission that does shift very smoothly whenever, you know, you're taking it easy here. You know, it's a pretty nice sounding engine too, I have to say. They did have an engine sound enhancer, I think, here for the F-Sport versions, which I think just gives you a little more growl under the hood. I think it's essentially like a sound tube. I don't think there's anything digital going on, but I'm not totally sure on that. But yeah, it is in normal mode a little lazier than I would like, though. That's just, you know, one thing that I continue to notice here. But otherwise, it's very quiet and you know, pretty smooth, refined ride here, even in the F-Sport version. Another nice thing you do get here with the F-Sport version, though, is an adaptive suspension, which I think certainly helps with you know, making that ride nice and smooth while still keeping it very planted and firm as well. I'm in manual mode now, and let's see how these paddles do. Okay, so even when I'm on throttle, it's certainly not super quick to respond. Again, not as quick as some of the other more sportier Lexus offerings, you know, but downshifts are actually really quick. So this kind of feels like some of the older Lexus transmissions, where they were always really good on the downshifts. It was just the upshifts that are a little lazier than, you know, you would like for an actual sporting application. But I think, you know, it's kind of silly to paddle shift in, you know, a normal family crossover anyway, but as we're coming up some corners here, see how this thing handles here in Sport Plus mode, and it's doing a really good job. So although, you know, these do weigh about 4,500 pounds, I think it's like 4,517 to be exact, you know, this adaptive suspension really does a good job of hiding that. I mean, you certainly feel the weight, especially in some of these tighter corners here. I can feel like not really wanting to go for it as much as I would like it to. So there's a little bit of, I don't know, like a hesitation, I guess, where, you know, it will turn in pretty quickly, but it just, you got to wait for the weight to catch up with what you want the thing to do. And so it's not bad. You know, I think I do really like how there isn't really much body roll. You know, there's a little bit of lean initially, and then it kind of stays right there and doesn't roll all over the place. It does handle decently well, though. You know, again, for an SUV that isn't a full-on performance version, you know, just the F-Sport line here, I think it's doing a pretty good job, again, given its weight, and the fact that it's kind of trying to straddle, you know, a happy medium of sporty and still comfortable. By the way, we are running Bridgestone tires that are 235 wide on these 20-inch wheels, so I think that's part of the downfall as well, is only 235 wide tires. That's pretty narrow, you know, for something that, you know, you would want to be sporty, especially whenever it's having to cope with 4,500 pounds of weight. That's a lot of weight for, you know, thin tires like that. So I think, you know, if you had a better wheel and tire setup on this, that would certainly help a lot with its handling. But, you know, as it sits, even, you know, in this configuration, it still handles plenty good enough, you know, for going on the occasional back road at a spirited pace. For most people's purposes of just driving these things, you know, on a normal road at normal speeds, you know, you're not in too much of a rush, I think it's going to feel really nice and buttoned down. One thing I will say, though, is regardless of whatever driving mode you're in, the steering has a really nice weight to it. It's not too light like some of the other crossovers in this segment. It has a nice bit of heft to it, and that helps it to feel pretty precise, you know, just because it's a little more weighty. But, you know, it's not still the sharpest of steering or anything like that. And that combined with, like I said, the somewhat mushy brake pedal and the slightly slower throttle response means that all your inputs are a little dulled, you know, so it doesn't feel razor sharp, unfortunately, but does feel pretty quick. And the throttle is kind of odd, because sometimes it actually does respond really quickly, and then there's other times where it either catches the transmission off guard, or it just does its own thing. And so there's sometimes where it's just slow, other times it is pretty good. It's not totally consistent, and that's something I'll be checking for again in my week of driving here. But yeah, so thanks to Lexus, I will have this vehicle for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all week, and I'll come back and give you guys my final thoughts and any other observations I have here on it, as well as my final fuel economy for the week, and a little bit of discussion on the pricing. Alright, so I've been driving the 2018 Lexus RX 350 F-Sport all-wheel drive here for about a week now, and I've put about 173 miles on it, and it was a pretty nice thing to drive around in for the week. One thing that really impressed me was this Mark Levinson surround sound system. Now, I've experienced these systems in other Lexus products in the past, and they've always sounded good, but this one for some reason stood out to me as just being even better than I remember them being, and was really impressive. Just nice, clear, powerful audio that just yeah, just, I don't know, I just turned it on and I was like, wow, this is really good. So that's something that was an impressive thing. Another thing is the safety features here on the Lexus. Now, I think it has the full standard safety suite that, you know, all the Lexus Toyota products get, which has the autonomous emergency braking, and also I think it has automatic reverse braking as well when you're backing up if it detects something. And it also has, you know, the blind spot monitoring. It does have lane keep assist, but you have to turn it on. I kind of like Toyota's systems. I think all of them in Lexus as well have it so that they don't default to being on. You have to turn them on if you want their help, which I personally like, because I often don't want the help of these systems, but whenever I do turn them on, it's nice, you know, to have them, and they work well. This does have lane keep assist, so it will actually help with steering, as well as just alerts whenever you're leaving your lane and stuff. But again, defaults to off, which is nice. I personally appreciate that. But I didn't get any false warnings in my week either. You know, a lot of times these autonomous emergency emergency braking systems, you know, are a little oversensitive and spaz out for no reason. And this one didn't do that. There was a couple of times even where the typical thing that freaks these systems out usually, where a car is turning off of the road and I'm, you know, not slowing down fast enough and it thinks I'm going to hit them even though I know I will clear them. And this system, even whenever I was doing that, didn't freak out. It seemed to either just be less sensitive, or it had faith that, you know, the car was going to turn off. Maybe it's a little more intelligent now. That would be nice. But either way, like I said, it didn't bother me at all during the week, which is rare that these systems never bother me. And so for the fact this one didn't, I really was impressed by that. A couple of things that weren't quite as impressive though. The first is the transmission here. Now again, there's sport mode, there's sport plus mode here with the F-Sport version. You can manually shift, but this transmission still bugged me because I feel like it still should be able to figure out what I want to do even if I'm not in some crazy sport mode. And even just normal driving mode, it should be quicker to react, and it's not. You know, there's lots of times where it just, like right now, it bogs down and then it's like, oh wait, you want a downshift, and then it gives me like 2 or 3 instead, and it's like, no, I just want a middle ground. I don't want to go to red line, but I also don't want to be sitting at 2,000 RPMs. And it just seems it's a little dim-witted with the transmission. I wish it had a little bit, you know, more intelligence as far as figuring out when it should downshift, and, you know, be a little quicker to react. But again, if you really, you know, are driving aggressively all the time, you flip into the sport mode and then you're totally good. It'll, you know, give you those downshifts a lot quicker. But I don't want to drive around in, you know, crazy racy sport plus mode all the time whenever I'm just cruising and just happen to need a little bit of extra passing power every once in a while. I don't want to, you know, fiddle with a bunch of buttons before I make a pass. So, you know, that's the only thing there that was a little bit annoying. Another thing that was a slight disappointment was the fuel economy. Now, these are rated at 19 in the city, 26 on the highway for a combined average of 22, which for a naturally aspirated, you know, large V6 heavy SUV sound like really good numbers. But unfortunately, in my real world testing here, it didn't even get close to the city number. My average driving here, I got 16.6 mpg in my 175 miles now of driving that I did. So again, just a little disappointing, honestly, because, you know, again, even if you're hammering on a car, you should be able to get that city number, because that city number by the EPA assumes you're sitting in stop and go traffic and, you know, accelerating and stopping, and I wasn't even doing that. I did a decent mix. It wasn't 50% highway, you know, a little less than that, but I did do a decent amount of highway driving and stuff to make up for the city driving I was doing, and still to be so far under the 19 mpg city rating and way under the 22 combined. You know, like I said, just a little disappointing. But despite that weight, you know, I still am really impressed with the handling here in the F-Sport version, the RX 350. I mean, it is heavy, and you do have a little bit of lean to it, but it actually feels, you know, fairly willing to, you know, be pushed in corners and things like that. You know, a little bit better than your average SUV, thanks to, again, that F-Sport suspension and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not, it doesn't bog down the experience too much there with, you know, the poor fuel economy and, you know, the little bit of a laggy transmission. You know, it still feels fairly athletic, again, especially if you have it in one of the sportier modes. And the last thing I want to mention here about the RX 350 is the pricing of it. So, you know, the RX is just the regular ones start, I think, in the mid 40,000 range, I think like 43, 44. This one, as tested, I don't actually have a window sticker for it, but if I configure one that has all the options this does online, it comes out to about 57 or 58,000, I think, which, you know, again, we're talking about a luxury SUV. And whenever you consider other luxury SUVs, I don't think it's, you know, overpriced, but it certainly is a little bit higher. You know, you look at stuff, it's kind of in a weird middle ground, because it's, you know, do you compare it with like a GLC or a GLE? You know, it's kind of in between the two classes, I think, size-wise, because it's smaller than the most mid-size, larger luxury SUVs, but it's, you know, a little bit bigger than some of the smaller ones like the GLC and stuff that are a little bit cheaper. So it's kind of in an interesting middle ground here. Now, you know, you can go for the larger one with the RX 350 L and 450 L, and you know, those give you that option of the third row there and a little bit more space. So that is, you know, that would, I would think you would consider that to be more closely akin to the GLE or something like that. You know, the X5s and those types of vehicles. But I really like the size of the RX here, and I kind of like how it doesn't feel quite as big as some of those. And again, with excellent visibility and everything, it's just you know, a little bit easier to drive drive, I think, a little easier to park, in my own personal opinion. And so, you know, at that price, you know, I think one of the things that stands out is the reliability. You know, Lexus they usually have like the top reliability rankings, the top service rankings as far as, you know, ownership experience and things like that. And so I think that is even worth a premium, because if you plan to keep one of these vehicles for a long time, you know, you don't plan to just lease it and get rid of it in a couple of years. If you actually keep your cars for a while, or you're buying one used, then, you know, having a vehicle that you know is going to be reliable for the long term is certainly worth, you know, whatever the pricing is for a luxury vehicle to actually last like these Lexuses do. I think, you know, is a huge selling point for them. But anyway, yeah, overall, like I said, it's a really impressive vehicle here. It's a huge thanks once again to Lexus for providing me with the RX 350 here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts about them in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.